Alexander, the best time to chop and drop some trees. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to turn my little camera around and see if it can pick me up. There we go. So this little camera I'm going to be using to repurpose this talk. There we go. Because what I like to do is try and make information as freely available to as many people as possible. I think we're all aiming at the same target here, aren't we? We're all trying to grow things that are healthy. We're trying to improve our health, and we're trying to improve the soil health and planetary health in general. So we're all aiming at the same thing. So I think free information, and then what I'm doing with the cameras and stuff is trying to repurpose that so that more people online who aren't here or overseas in different parts of the world can find that information and then share it around as well. So today's topic, generally in the workshops and things that I was running earlier, we were talking about building soil health over time, all right? And what we're trying to think about with soil health is thinking about actually mimicking nature and the natural cycles and things that we find outside. Too often, we're stuck swimming upstream against challenges that we face, right? So for example, you might be stuck with clay soil, or you might be stuck with really sandy soil or something like this. And we're kind of coming into this sandy soil or clay soil and thinking, I want to plant a whole bunch of vegetables in here, or I want to plant my beautiful flowers and I want to have a bit of this and a bit of that. But nature has other ideas sometimes, doesn't it? And it says, no, sorry, that's not going to work here, but this might do, okay? And I want to try and bring a bit of a big picture thought to how we're looking at our land, how we're looking at our gardens, and how we're trying to mimic nature. And we'll get a little bit further down the rabbit hole in terms of what we're talking about today, chopping and dropping, and cover crops in general and things like this. So if we have a look around in nature, and let's think about a rainforest or something like this. Okay, we've got our beautiful Daintree rainforest up in Queensland. This is a natural ecosystem that is using a chop and drop technique, all right, whereby all this organic matter and material is falling off the plants, off the trees, and falling down onto the forest floor. Okay, now no one's coming in and digging it up and planting nice neat rows and labeling my corn here, my tomatoes, my flowers. That doesn't happen in nature, right? So we're going to be looking at nature and seeing exactly how it's doing it, the perfect blueprint, and we're going to try and take some of that knowledge, that technology, and use it for our own gardens. So in the rainforest, okay, you've got animals that are coming through the trees, they're breaking off branches, the leaves are falling in the different seasons, we've got dead insects, we've got manure, we've got all sorts of things happening and falling down onto this mulch layer on top of the ground. And what that's doing is it's allowing this blanket of mulch to cover the soil. It keeps the moisture in there, but more importantly, we're actually feeding the soil. It's actually pretty close in terms of, if you have a tree, for example, that's growing, the organic matter that falls off that tree is actually designed to feed that tree again with the right nutrients. It's funny how that cycle seems to work quite well. So in a natural ecosystem like our rainforests and things like this, we have so much diversity. And diversity is the middle name of nature. If you've got a garden that is just one block of corn, it's not super diverse. We're not bringing in diverse life underneath that soil ecosystem, all right? If you're familiar with Dr. Elaine Ingham, she has this concept of a soil food web, and all of that material that is falling and being dropped down onto the top of the soil, onto this mulch layer, is being taken in by this soil food web underneath the soil. And what do I mean by that web? Okay, I mean worms. They're probably one of the most obvious ones that we know of. Okay, they're taking organic matter, they're breaking it down, and they're turning it into plant available nutrients. What else have we got? We've got things like fungus. All right, fungus is so incredibly important into our soil food web. It's got parts where it's sending out, it's attaching to the root, and it's sending out its network and its arms all throughout the soil to pull nutrients, communicate, share resources, share water for all of our plants underneath. So when all of this material is dropping down, we're having these wonderful workers in the soil doing what they do best, coming and breaking that down and turning it into plant available nutrients. So how does this relate to our gardens? How can we mimic this on our scales at home? I'm just going to get a little bit of a show of hands, if you don't mind. Who is growing on a small scale, pots, containers, garden beds, small scale? Beautiful. Okay. Who's in what I would call the middle section? We've got maybe an acre or somewhere around there. Yeah, couple, awesome. And then who's got so much land that we're all jealous of? Okay, cool. Well, regardless, we can use these techniques everywhere. Okay, when you've got heaps and heaps and heaps of land, we're kind of stuck with, not being able to maintain and do all of that work on all of this land. So we kind of just let it do its thing. And what does it do? It chops and drops itself naturally. So if we've got a small pot or a container or a balcony, we're often grabbing a bag of potting soil from the local garden centre or the big green shed, and we're throwing it in a pot. We're growing something in it, and then you might have a good season first of all, and then after that, okay, it starts to go downhill, and then we go, oh, this is all dead. Discard that soil, and then we start again. We grab a new fresh bag of potting mix. And that's not what nature is doing. Nature is improving that soil year after year after year, and improving and improving and improving. So we can still do that in our pots and containers. It is possible. And that's kind of what I was touching on a whole bunch of the living soil talks earlier. If you missed that, it will be up on YouTube as well. So you can go and listen to that. Really cool. So one of the techniques that we use in building soil, especially anywhere from our small pots to our sort of larger scales, is using a technique called cover cropping or green manure. Anybody heard of or used this before? A couple. All right. It's not often thought about on our smaller scales. It's often used by farmers and things that might have a big sort of couple of rows, and they might throw down something in between their seasonal crops to basically do a few jobs. If you're out in the field, if you have a cover crop, meaning it's a crop that is covering the ground, okay, we're stopping weed seeds from coming up. We're stopping the sun from beating down on the soil. Really interesting studies have shown that one farm compared to one right next door, if you measure the temperature of the field, one with cover crop versus an exposed bare ground might be 30 degrees difference in some places. You imagine how much water loss that is. So if we've got something that's covering the ground, it's doing that purpose of keeping that moisture, that temperature down. But what else is it doing? It's also feeding the microbes in the soil. Our cover crops, or crops, plants in general, especially again diverse plants, are bringing in a diverse range of microbes. So using a cover crop or a green manure seed blend, the more the merrier seems to be quite the message. And this is kind of like everything in nature. It seems to sort of make room for everybody, balance it out. A bit of biodiversity works so super well. So if we've got a whole bunch of different seeds that we throw down, say for example, I've got my pot, I used it, okay, and now we've pulled out the crop or whatever it is. Just a quick note on that, we're not trying to rip up roots and all when we're done with it. We want to chop and drop, not rip and discard. So what we're actually doing is chopping often right above the soil level. So you're chopping, and sometimes you can just go a little bit into the soil, but right at the soil level. Then you can kind of chop that plant up a little bit further if you want to, or simply just throw it straight back down on top. That's going to provide a mulch layer. So in the farms, you'll see them grow up a whole field of this cover crop, and then they might come through and flatten it with a crimper or a big industrial machine or something. But on our scale, we could use some scissors in a pot, or I've got my little Japanese knife, which is really wonderful for just terminating it, and you slice it off above the root system, throw it back down on top. Those roots are then going to go break down in the soil and in turn feed the soil as well. They're keeping it aerated by those pockets of oxygen that are in there as well. And we're allowing the water penetration to come down deeper into that soil. If you've pulled it up, we're slicing and dicing all of those networks that have been built up, those mycelial networks. If you were here talking about the mushrooms before, they have this incredible mycelial network that you can see. This communication network runs all throughout the soil. And if we're coming in and turning over that soil and slicing it, it's like someone coming and slicing the internet and phone lines all the time. Okay, and this is not something that we want to be doing. We want to allow it to continue to communicate and share resources and things like this. So for example, we've got our pot, okay, we've finished with it. We're going to throw down some of this green manure or cover crop and allow it to grow up. We're going to have a diverse range of species. Okay, I actually have a cover crop blend, which I can get out and pass around towards the end, which would be nice so you can see the different varieties of seeds. But these seeds are then going in, they're growing up, and they're each providing a different purpose in the soil. Some, okay, we've got our nitrogen fixers. We've got snow peas. Everybody knows the Three Sisters method, some often used. We climb beans up our corn or something like this, which is helping to fix the nitrogen and feed that heavy feeder, that corn. So we've got nitrogen fixers, clover, snow peas, cowpeas, things like this that are bringing atmospheric nitrogen, fixing it into the soil. So if that's your goal, if you need more nitrogen, more food in your soil, then you might turn to one of those as a cover crop option. The second one we have is grasses, okay, barley grasses, oat grasses, rye grasses. These are wonderful because they have beautiful fibrous roots that can hold soil together, that can prevent soil erosion. It's also providing a bit of that blanket, keeping the moisture in. And there's some wonderful organic matter that comes out of nice grasses, okay? Another one are brassicas. Brassicas have some natural biofumigants as well, which help us with our pest and disease pressure. But they also often have quite big taproots. And the taproots are going down and they're splitting apart that compacted soil, and they're allowing for that oxygen exchange, and they're allowing for water penetration. So these cover crops have a purpose depending on which species we're turning to and why. Something magic seems to happen once we hit a certain level of diversity, past sort of 12 seeds. And if they hit these certain family groups that come together, there's this exponential explosion of life in the soil that seems to happen. People have studied it extensively, and it's just a marked improvement. And this is another advocacy I would advocate for biodiversity in the garden. More biodiversity means more microbes in the soil, means more plant available nutrients. If we've got a big buffet of food, everybody can eat. Okay, that's the purpose. But bringing it back to the title of this talk, or what we're talking about here, is when is the best time to then chop and drop, right? And it depends on what we are chopping and dropping. If you've got a citrus tree, for example, there are certain times of year that are better for pruning our trees. And we come in and we do certain cuts basing on different things like this. Phil Dudman, awesome guy to be talking about pruning your citrus. Okay, but there's a certain time of year that we do these types of prunings. And then you can feed them through a chipper, or you can put them through your compost, but throw them back down at the base of the tree and it will break down and feed that tree. Okay, we've then got our vegetables and things. Some things like a tomato, all right, or a corn, where it's got this one plant cycle that it runs through and then finishes, okay? We want to use that and chop and drop all those empty corn stalks and all of the tomatoes and chop all of that extra stuff and throw it back down on the soil. It's then mulch again. It's turning into food, okay? If you've got, say, you've already mulched on your little raised bed or your garden bed, that's okay. We can throw it down on top of that mulch. It's fine. And yes, sometimes it can look a bit messy, but nature's messy. Okay, it's not clean. It doesn't have beautiful sections with beautiful, labeled outlines. It just doesn't work like that. So we have to get used to a little bit of mess. Now, going into cover crops, when's the right time to chop and drop our cover crops? Okay, if we think about the seed itself, okay, the actual seed, when you're holding it before it's been germinated, that seed holds an incredible amount of potential. It could be a tree, it could be a legume, it could be anything. It's got all of that potential in that seed. So this is why microgreens are quite a popular and healthy thing, because they contain so much concentrated energy, so to speak, in that tiny little sprout, okay? Now, we could then allow a huge amount of growth. We could let it just grow and grow and grow and go to seed and go to flower and all of these things, and get some benefits of bringing in pollinators or helping it self-seed like a buckwheat or something might. But it depends on our purpose. So if we want organic matter to be a mulch layer, if we want a nice thick layer of green manure, we're going to let this grow up. We've got a lot of biomass that we can then come through and wipe out and throw straight back down on top, and that's going to help feed everything beautifully well, isn't it? So then if we want a quick burst of nutrients and we've got a short cycle and I've got spring's coming and I need to get my seedlings in, then you can come and terminate those little seedlings or throw a bit of mulch and compost back on top, and it will terminate and be broken down into that soil. It's really important that we have the life in that soil to actually break that down. A lot of our potting mixes that you might buy from the big green shed are completely sterilized of all life possible. It's an unfortunate part of some of the standards that we have to uphold. But we want lots of life, biology in that soil. And I always shout out the guys at Red Soil Organics just over there. They have an incredibly high biology amount in all of their products. So we're trying to cultivate all of this biology and bring it in so it can break down that soil. So if we've got a cover crop, we've got something growing up, we're going to terminate it at a short amount. We're getting lots of work straight back in. But if you have a large amount, you can let it grow up and you can come through and lawnmower it or whippersnipper it or just crimp it down and flatten it. And you can also use it as a living mulch. And what I mean by that is similar to that Three Sisters method that we spoke about before, whereby we have a nitrogen fixing plant that's in and around the main crop, supplementing it and helping to feed it at the same time. Sometimes we're scared of having something planted in the same pot because it might be stealing nutrients or competing or outcompeting. But if we're thinking about the reason as to why that plant is in there, we're using it to its maximum effect. We're putting in that legume that's going to fix the nitrogen to feed the corn. And you could have this beautiful sort of understory of clover that's flowering, bringing in pollinators, fixing nitrogen, and you've got your beautiful healthy tomatoes above it. Okay, so these techniques where we're thinking about whether or not to, okay, do I just chop now, do I, chop this or that, it really doesn't matter. We're getting organic matter and we're feeding the soil. We're coming back to this term of biodiversity, diversity in organic matter. So often, yes, like I said, you could chop the citrus and put the citrus tree right back down on the ground underneath it. But what you could also do is cut some of your citrus, run it through the chipper and spread it on your veggie garden. You could take some of your comfrey that's growing in one part of the garden. Comfrey is amazing, such a really, really good input. Chopping and dropping your comfrey and putting it in amongst all of your other mulch and putting it on top. All right? This biodiversity in species is going to feed and allow for a nice big buffet of soil. Okay? So when we're choosing a cover crop, the one that I have actually developed is a winter heavy cover crop. There's lots of legumes in there, there's clover and things like that. But as we know, especially here in Queensland, you can't grow snow peas in the summer. They get absolutely wiped out. So you might turn to something else. You might use a sunflower. Okay, sunflowers just love the sun, so we can deal really well with the sunflower. Pigeon pea is a really good fast growing one that provides lots of organic matter that you can chop and drop straight back into there. But the idea of the chop and drop is to mimic, as we said, that forest floor. We're building that forest floor layer of diversity on the soil that's allowing all of this soil life to come up underneath that blanket, pull it down and work it into plant available nutrients. Does that make sense? Beautiful, I love that. Okay, what I want to kind of touch on for the last few minutes is thinking about not only biodiversity in what we're planting, because rather than planting, like I said, one bed of corn, one bed of tomatoes, one bed of cucumbers, we might want to have a little bit of everything, some flowers, some herbs, some vegetables, and have them in amongst each other, hopefully some natives in there as well. So these combinations of plants and all of it, we're going to be blown away here in a second. I'm worried about this TV. I think I need to grab it in a second. So this diversity that we're bringing in, we can also do this with something like a compost. All right. So yes, you can chop and drop and throw straight down, but often we have so much organic matter. You might be, pulling a Bananas are a good one. They're just constantly producing pups. They're a really, really good input for chopping and dropping straight back on the banana plant. So if you have bananas, really, really good one for that. But also we can take some of that and put it in our compost and get all of these really diverse ranges of organic matter into the compost, so that we have, again, a diverse range of microbes, bacteria, fungus developing in this compost that we can then bring back into those gardens and spread around, okay? If you were over at one of my talks, I talk about this buffet of food idea and how the life in the soil is turning something that we not necessarily know what to do with. For example, a raw chicken. You turn up to your breakfast buffet and there's a raw chicken. You thought, I don't know what to do with it. I can't do anything with that. But if you've had one of the workers who has prepped that chicken for you, and then everybody can have a piece of chicken, everybody's happy, right? So we're thinking about this same idea. You can imagine a leaf or a stick or something that we've chopped and dropped onto the soil is our raw ingredient, and then we need our workers in the soil to actually turn that into plant available form, all right? This is where composting, vermicomposting through the worm farm comes in, but it also is in nature. The rainforest does it automatically, okay? It's already on its way to doing that kind of thing. So lastly, before I wrap up, when you're choosing, like I said, cover crops, if it's a winter or a summer variety, I don't want you to get bogged down too much in, oh, I need this seed, or I need this seed, or I need this many things. The idea is get things growing, whatever grows where you are. It's really important that we look around us for what's growing well in our area. And I say this a lot, that you might go to the garden centre and want a certain plant, like you see your neighbour's got a beautiful bougainvillea, for example. One of my favourites, but also my arch nemesis. Someone's got one of those, or something like this, or a rose, or whatever it might be. You then go, oh, that's really beautiful. And then you go, I'm going to go get a rose. And you go off to the garden centre and you buy yourself a rose and you put it in the ground, and then it struggles big time. Because that rose might have been grown in a different state, in a climate-controlled greenhouse or environment before it gets to you, and then you're throwing it in a brand new environment with all of this transplant shock, and it's going, you know? So go to your neighbour and say, hey, that's a really beautiful bougainvillea. Do you mind if I pinch a cutting? And you're going to be thrilled because it's already suited to that environment. It already knows that it's going to grow well in that environment. This also goes for looking at the soil, looking at the plants and working out, do I have clay soil? Do I have sandy soil? What do I need to do? Where is my soil taking us? We have this natural succession of the moving of the land, sometimes over an enormous scale that we can't comprehend, something from a rainforest to a desert, or a desert to a rainforest. It's moving and oscillating between those two. This is where our pioneer species, like our weeds and things, come in. Everybody has left a bare patch of soil and seen weeds pop up in it, okay? They are there for a reason. They're coming out to either provide aeration and drainage into the soil, or provide structure, or provide shade, or bring moisture back. They're all there for a reason. So this is why we can pick and choose plant species and cover crops and all of these types of things that are going to suit that natural progression. And actually we can kind of be a little bit creative and say, I want this plant instead of that weed, and it will do its job for you. Does that all make sense? I could honestly go into this for years and years with you all, but I have to wrap up on a time. So if you see me floating around, come and say hi. But do you have any questions? Can we
say your
yes, absolutely.
So, any questions? Yes, one there.
Yes.
If a plant is diseased, let's say you
Yes.
got a pumpkin and it had some sort of fungus,
Yes.
would you still chop it or would you put it in the bin?
That's a really good question. Certain, especially with a pathogen, like say like a sooty kind of, or powdery mildew or something like this. You don't want to be putting it back into the soil, because then it's a soil-based pathogen and it's going to be coming back in. That's a really good point to remember. So if you do have something that needs to be discarded, take it to a different area of the garden. I wouldn't even run it through your compost, honestly, because unless you're guaranteed to get that right amount of temperature in your compost to kill off those pathogens, then you're just going to risk of bringing them back into the garden. Although I will say, healthy soil, if you've got a completely balanced and full buffet of nutrition, then the cell wall strength of that plant, the silica and calcium content that makes that plant nice and strong and sturdy, is not attractive to pests and disease anymore. A sick plant is a signal to our insects, our decomposers, to come in and say, take us out. We're not doing our job properly, we need to be taken out, fed back to the soil and turned in. So it's a bit of both. We fix the soil first, we're going to get less pathogens, and then when you do have them, we discard them safely. Great point. Thank you for pointing that out. Any others? Yeah, yes?
I'm doing a lot of chop and drop with the banana leaves, but I find
Amazing.
it water repellent, so it's not getting. Is there anything I can put on top of it besides chopping up more that will help decompose the banana?
Yeah, so you can then throw a mulch over the top. Blanket mulch of any kind really will just help to sort of smother that. The other ways of doing it is to make the material finer. So actually, that's why I say like running it through a chipper. Obviously bananas are a little bit different for that kind of thing, but coming in with your machete when you're chopping it, or coming in and actually just doing smaller pieces, helps that water penetration a little bit better. But yeah, you can then come in and throw a mulch of like some sugarcane, or hopefully bigger piece of sugarcane, because it tends to be hydrophobic, but barley straw, anything like that, grass clippings, just throwing a blanket over it so it kind of keeps it all in. Does that make sense? Yeah.
More work. I was trying to make the easier.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it is a little bit, it's a bit difficult. Anybody else?
One last question.
I am going to be floating around, so if you want to come and see me, come and say good day.
Have you done all your workshops? Have you got
Yes, I've done. All finished for the weekend. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate you coming.